Look at this. Final Cut Pros Saturday meetup. And we have Mr. in my upper left, Bill Davis. In my lower left, Brad Olson. And from Buenos Aires, is that where you're from, Leo?
Yeah.
Argentina, Leo Hans. Haven't seen Leo for quite a while. So what's happening with Final Cut Pro in Argentina?
Not much, I have to say. But it's like always, nothing new, but it's working. People is cutting stuff in Final Cut, so everything is going fine.
Do they have? Is Avid big there? Or?
Actually, Premiere.
Oh, Premiere. Okay.
Yeah. Avid is more for feature movies.
Okay.
But not for advertising or television, mostly. But yes, Premiere.
Huh. Very interesting. So at one point you were in charge of the Final Cut Pro group there.
Yes, I'm still.
You still are? Okay.
Yeah. Yes, I'm still in charge. Actually, I was the creator for the group.
Right.
So
I remember.
I think I'm going to still be there for a while.
So how many people does it have? Does it have a lot of people? Or
in Facebook group,
yeah,
it's about near 1,000.
Wow.
But
that's great.
It's approval only. So if you want to join, you have to say, why do you want to join?
Sure.
And have to say yes for some rules.
Right.
And we have a few rejections.
Right.
For instance, no piracy.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that could be a deal breaker.
Oh, no piracy. I'm not interested.
Right. So when I have a couple of groups myself, and I always, when people ask about joining and they don't have any prior Final Cut Pro groups they belong to, and I look at their list of things they belong to, and there's nothing to do with video or audio, I can't accept them because I don't know what they are. You know, so it's the same kind of thing, I guess.
But in the case of Final Cut Pro, I think a lot of people coming from other kind of activities want to join because they are learning, because they are on social media or something, they want to create video.
Right.
And I think we should be open for that, but at the same time, they are amateurs, so sometimes not even amateurs. So we have to be ready for to answer some basic questions sometimes.
Yeah, in fact, I have a good example of somebody who's you wouldn't think is in video, but is using Final Cut a lot actually. When I was in New York, and Frame.io sponsored a screening of Off the Tracks, and I got up really early the next morning to catch a flight, and I was taking a shuttle back, and I was sitting next to a gentleman and his wife on the ride back, and he asked why I was, in New York, and I talked about Off the Tracks and Final Cut, and he's like, oh, and I said, well, why are you here? And he said that he was there for some sort of religious conference, I guess different group leaders. He was like a pastor, and he was meeting up with some other people, and they have their own little conference there. And he said that he uses Final Cut every week to cut all of their content for his church. So here's somebody who's been using it a lot, and he's like, well, I'm not a professional editor or anything, but I'm like, yeah, but if you're using it every week, that's a completely different breed of somebody who needs video to reach an audience than we've seen in the past. I mean, but you could see a church before hiring professionals, but somebody who runs his own fairly successful large organization using it every week is kind of a different thing.
Can you spell democratization?
Yes.
This was one of the points of the whole thing. It's interesting because I've been involved in users groups grew up with them back from the Mac users groups when in 1984 when the Mac came out and went through it. So there's always this arc. There's always, everybody doesn't know a darn thing. We're all complete idiots because the tool is brand new, the software's nobody knows anything. So you get together with a bunch of people. And then as time goes by, some of those people become more and more advanced and new people flood in who don't know anything. And then the kind of the second level is that suddenly the people who've been around a long time get a little bit tired of answering the same old beginner questions over and over again as new people come in. And you want to encourage new people to come in, but if all you do is stick with that beginning stuff, then everybody who's been there for a while just gets more and more bored. And I'm tired of just answering the same questions over and over. So then you start splintering. And you get a high end and a middle end and a low end brand new people. And hopefully the middle people who are just out of the beginner stage help the people who are coming in as they themselves were helped to get to the middle stage. And eventually the people who have been there for the whole, with the most expertise, do just by natural kind of dint of things, you're gonna stop answering the really fundamental questions and you're gonna help the middle people, and that's just kind of how they organically grow.
I have two things. One, can you spell democratization? I have to say I'm really grateful for spell check because that's a word that as I type out democratization. Anyway, the second point is I actually find, and I see exactly what you're talking about happening, and especially in the last 3 or 4 years, because, in the 2013-2014 time period, there was a lot of basic questions being asked and nobody had a problem with answering them. But now you get you get people grumbling, this has been answered, search the forums, do a Google search. But I do find something very fascinating about the beginner's mindset. And one of the things, an aha moment I had, was I couldn't understand why. I don't know if I brought this up on the show before, Richard. Stop me if I have, but you can say, we've already talked about this. But I couldn't understand why people, beginners, were having such difficulties synchronizing their video and audio clips. And I kept thinking, it's right there. Like they were making compound clips instead of synchronized or multicam clips, and I couldn't understand why they were doing that. Because in my mind, you're in the browser, you're selecting a couple clips, and you have these three options. Do I make a multicam clip? Do I make a synchronized clip? Do I make a compound clip? And it's obvious to me, based off of what you're selecting, what you would do. And it wasn't until I was watching somebody's help YouTube video for Final Cut that had like 40 or 50,000 views on it. And he was explaining how how to sync different video and audio clips, and he was bringing everything into the timeline. And that's when I realized he was manually syncing in a timeline. I'm like, that's why they're making compound clips. And then it becomes a question of, is this is there a way for the software to help these people, these poor souls out, or do they just need to learn there's the right way to do it? Or is there a way maybe in the timeline, should it be something Apple should take a look at?
Brad, there's a worse issue.
People.
There's a worse issue than and it's related to that. And it is, you have to realize that the more experience somebody had before they came to 10, if they've never seen 10 before, they're not coming as a neutral party. They're coming with workflow expectations, sometimes from 10 or 15 years. And how many of the same arc have we ever seen? Somebody with a lot of experience shows up in the 10 groups, and they get really pissed off, and they bitch and they want these changes and those differences, and please make it work this way. And then if they stay around and they fall in love with 10, and I've seen probably 40 or 50 of these type users do that, you watch, and it takes about a year, and after a year they stop wanting it to be their old workflow, and they start to embrace and they start to flip over. And to me, the most interesting thing is, when do they stop yelling about those little old things that are still pain points? No question. You get into these things that have been persistent. Why doesn't 10 do this way? And there's some of those topics that are still out there. Hi, Sean Lander, wherever you are. And I get it. They desperately want this old thing that they were really comfortable with to come back. But eventually it kind of does fade into being that just little thorn in your little toe. And you still remember it, but it doesn't hurt so much that it stops you. And then they make their full transition. But to my thinking, as long that period, which sometimes can take a few months, sometimes can take a few years to accept that you're never going to get 100% of what your old editor self had, grieve for it and move on. And now you're going to get all these new things that make you a whole lot faster and a gigantic amount more productive. But the loss is going to remain. You will never get some of those things back, and you just have to deal with it.
Well, I was going to say two things. Well, a couple things on that. One is I actually have not a huge. I don't really care what legacy editors really want.
but
I was going to say, I get it. What I was going to say though is I'm talking more about this in this case specifically. This was somebody coming from iMovie, and these are and I'm seeing it among like high school and college kids doing it this way. And what I realized in iMovie, there isn't really a browser like there is in Final Cut. So if you want to synchronize, multiple camera angles or things in iMovie, you put it all in iMovie's timeline. So that's the question, I think, for the Apple designers. Is there something that we should be doing in iMovie to train them correctly, or is there a magical way to do it different ways? Because Final Cut does allow you to do some things, 4 or 5 different ways. And I don't have the answer to that. It's just an interesting, behavior that people are bringing to the application. And then you have to ask the question of, do you cater towards the beginner mindset? You make it easier for them? Do you force them to learn a different way because it's better? And there's a nuance to that, Like a lot of things in Final Cut 10, I think, are very much the magnetic timeline itself. For a beginner, is something is faster to grasp onto, and so it's. I don't know. I don't know the line between those worlds. It's a tough question.
We have a comment from Ronnie Cortens. Ronnie says, "Nice T-shirt, Brad."
Yeah, I picked the NAB. I was Alan Seawright and myself and Chris Fenwick got adopted into the Utah team, where we were videoing people before the event started, and then Chris had the job to cut all of the videos, and we cut. I think we put together 5 videos that we played during the event. Bill knows, he was backstage, he was working it.
I never got the T-shirt though. I didn't pick up a T-shirt.
You didn't get a T-shirt?
No,
you had to go to the green room and ask Krista for one.
So here's a weird story. While I was doing the auction, while I was doing the raffle, a guy brought up a thumb drive, or not a thumb drive, an actual hand pouch full of SD cards. And I thought, oh my God, these are gigantic SD cards. This must have somebody's life work on them. We made the announcement twice, didn't find it. Turns out that somebody had lost this huge thing of SD cards. And so I went on to Reddit and I posted, if you read Faster Together, blah, blah. It took about a week, but I finally connected with the guy and I shipped him his SD cards back. I mean, these had tens of thousands of his photos on them. And I did get a ping that I was going to get a shirt out of it. I thought it was one of those shirts and I never got it. So you have to just give it up in the cosmos, do the right thing. And sometimes you'll get rewarded, sometimes you won't, but that's okay.
I have beginners, but it's difficult to say that about because in groups you have a lot of users, but you have just a few interacting. So it's really difficult to know if anybody is intermediate or based, because it's just don't show in the group. But for instance, last time a newbie asked a question and somebody answered the question. And I thought to myself, the guy asking, answering the question was the developer, Ferdinand, the developer of MergeX. Okay, nobody in the groups knows that.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say he is an basic level user. It's really a high level user. And they all talk at the same level. And I think that's interesting. And after a while, I stopped. I don't need to answer myself.
Right.
At the beginning, I had to answer every single question. Now, in the group, it's plenty of pro users that can answer the questions for themselves. And I think it's interesting, the group being alive just with the users. I'm just monitoring because I don't have too much time.
Right.
So I think that's the interesting thing. And about the question we are talking about cut and that stuff Bill said that there are still people wanting to have things done in the old ways. Like, I don't know, I want to invest my stuff using this. I don't have it in Final Cut, but you can do it in a different way, but you can do it. And it's not a workaround. It's just the way you should do it here in Final Cut. Well, I think people, people is not seeing something bigger. The whole market is changing.
Amen.
For instance,
Yep.
in advertising, okay? I'm not going to talk about money, but editors in advertising, they are very well paid, okay? But that's ending now, okay? Why? Because the TV ad was the main piece of the campaign. They have some letters in the street, some magazine advertising, and the commercial, the advertising piece in the television was always the big budget thing. Not anymore.
Okay.
Okay, last time I was presenting a commercial for a big client. Okay, it was an international client. We were watching the commercial. It was like going to church some time ago. Okay, everybody was just looking at the commercial. In the middle of the commercial, a 1 minute piece, just 1 minute. Okay, the client say, "Hey, look at this," and it was an actress involved in the commercial, but she put in her Instagram account, "I love this," and it was the product.
Right.
So nobody cares anymore about the commercial. An Instagram post sells way much than a commercial.
Yeah.
So now the editor was for the commercial, for the TV, and all stuff in the living room. Okay. My daughter my daughter is 13 and she doesn't watch TV. Okay, nothing on the television.
Right. But she's smart.
Netflix. Okay, no, it's the generation. So
yeah, she's got a
what's
different
the point of traditional advertising? Okay, why? Well, it's an interesting business for the TV agencies still and for the production companies, but I don't know if the clients have the same interest in commercials now. And for one editor cutting the commercial, they have community managers, they have people involved in creating the digital media, the algorithms to choose the media, the targets, and we are just a small piece now. So I'm working with the campaign for person for politics now, for months ahead, and we are always working with After Effects and Premiere, for instance, for this, and we are 2 editors and 15 other people working in After Effects or Premiere, but they are content creators. They are not editors. They do a lot of stuff, nothing good, but a lot of stuff. I think that's the way towards the world is going.
It certainly is changing.
Why not to have a very good, we can do it all piece of software like Final Cut in a high quality video and speed. I don't know. I think that's the way to go. Just because
I think Leo's on to something
I think
here.
Apple saw that.
Yeah. The language is changing too. It's interesting. I just got out of a series of meetings with a small client I'm peripherally involved with, and then dealing with their agencies. It's funny to hear an agency talking about their social campaigns in breaking it up into one subset of the social campaign that is crafted and the other that is attempting to do what's called organic social media marketing, which is the least organic thing in the world. I mean, it's like you're attempting to put messages out there in a way that people think you didn't try to put messages out there. It is the most mind-bending, confusing thing in the world to think that, and all these agencies are scrambling to do this kind of organic social media marketing when that's an oxymoron in itself. What they're trying to replicate is these viral things that have no intent behind them. They just happen because of the nature of the moment, the nature of what is being said, and the nature of what needs to be said. And it's kind of weird after all. I spent 40 years inside meetings and ad agencies and things like that. And half the time, I don't think anybody knows what the hell they're doing anymore.
I think the Russians do.
Well, of course.
Well, they're using similar techniques of understanding that the eyeballs have migrated different and that influencing is done differently. And yeah, you can groom that to happen if you are of a mind to try to do that for a slice of time. Mm-hmm. And it will happen and it will be important and it will be like lolcat videos. It will be nothing, and then it will sweep across the internet at that stage of its life, and then the curve will diminish and it will go away. And other than in little niche communities, it's not that big a deal anymore. But these are the waves I think they're going to have for the rest of our lives. It's going to be a real weird environment.
I was just pointing out, like, it's funny that the ad agencies are spending so much time, and I've worked with companies and people that put some of these things out there, and some of them are successful, but a lot of them, I don't know what the secret formula to getting, tons of subscribers and people on YouTube. You can break it down into some things that made some people successful, but you can have YouTube training on Final Cut, like I was talking about earlier, that shows you the wrong way to use the software that has more views
Absolutely.
than the best training that you can find on YouTube. So I don't know the rhyme or reason, but it is interesting that, we look at something like how Facebook got hijacked with fake news and whatnot, and there are people that figure out how to, and of course that's a lot to do with controversy. Is how a lot of eyeballs get on there and reaffirming people's beliefs and whatnot, and sense of tribalism, I guess.
I'm less concerned with fake news than I am with real news being rebranded as fake news. That's scarier to me.
Well, ever since Dan Rather, he was the first person to do the fake news.
It's been going on for a long time.
Exactly.
This is nothing new. The scale of it is new.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let's don't talk about politics for sure.
I was just more bringing up.
No, I understand.
How do you use video?
Well, I wonder.
It is a rational thing to discuss, though, because as content creators, what do you do when somebody says, "I've got some money for you. Here's a thing I'm going to promote," and you realize the thing ain't really real?
Or
it's the Fire Festival again.
maybe it's something you don't believe in, or something that's maybe not a little shady.
I remember the first time I said no to doing voiceovers because I thought, this is too close to being a pyramid scam. I just don't want to do it.
Right.
And the engineer at the station looked at me and said, are you nuts? They have
'Cause
money. And
money,
they're gonna,
right.
Yeah, and you're going, I just don't want to do this. I don't want to be associated with this thing.
Leo,
it's hard to do.
It's
hard to do when you're starting.
Did you follow NAB when NAB was happening, Leo?
No.
You didn't follow
Not
it?
this year.
Are you
Not
going to
this
watch? Are you going to watch WWDC?
Probably I will.
Okay. So what do we think is going to happen at WWDC? Everybody seems to think, and once again, I have nothing from Apple, but everybody thinks there's going to be a Mac Pro preview. Everybody says it's like it's a known fact or something.
I guess it should be. I don't know if it's going to be, but it should.
Yeah.
Sheila talk about the new Mac Pro, the modular one, was 2 years ago. So I think it's time to have some news about that.
So Apple did say 2019. They absolutely said it's a 2019 product. So WWDC would be a good time to showcase whatever they're doing.
Because
yeah,
in the past they launched. I don't think it's G5 was. They have some computers for developers.
Right.
I think it wasn't with G5 in the
WWDC.
Yeah,
WD.
that thing.
G5's a long time ago, Leo. I didn't know you were that old.
Yeah. Well, I am 45.
Okay.
I'm thinking that I'm usually really hesitant about going out on a limb and saying, I think we're going to do this or I think we're going to do that. But I suspect we might have at least some small mention. In a couple of WWDCs, right, it was like, oh, there's this little thing that you get to look at, and if you decode it, that's the new thing, and you didn't know it was there. I'm not sure they'll make it a splash and say, hey, look at the new Mac Pro, there's what it's going to look like.
But that's what they did in 2013, though.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they don't do that, but it's few times and far between. And the problem with doing that for me, I think, is that if they do that, right, let's say they just unveil a table and they don't turn it on, don't do anything, say, here's the form factor of the new Mac Pro. What will the next 4 weeks be about?
It'll
Everybody on the planet will tell them what they did wrong.
Listen, I already put up a top 10 complaints about the 2019 Mac Pro before it came out.
Exactly.
Because I know exactly what they're. First off, they're going to say it costs too much. Second off, they can build a PC for half the price, et cetera, right down the line. We've already seen this.
Doesn't have enough ports. They're not the right ports. You haven't even seen the back of it. You don't even know what ports are there.
Doesn't have FireWire.
Yeah, it doesn't have the next Bluetooth after the Bluetooth that we're waiting for that hasn't even shipped yet. We want the one after that. It doesn't have it, so it's crap.
But I'm curious though, because everybody's not even saying this is a rumor. They're saying they're pretty sure they're going to show it. I'd be disappointed if they didn't at this point. I mean, they have to show it at some point in 2019, right?
Yeah, I guess. The question: will it spring forth fully formed? Will we get anything or not here? And then at the end, which, the Creative Summit, that's pretty close to the end of the year.
Right.
So will they opt instead in marketing for a full-blown, here it is, and it's going to be available January 1st kind of rollout that long in the year? My assumption after watching them for all these years is that it just depends on how close to locked they think they've got it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes, but
I think it's ready to show to the world, personally.
I did too.
They've talked about it since 2017. That's when we first heard wind that they're redesigning the Mac Pro. Last year, they reaffirmed that it's coming out in 2019. Not 2018 product. It's going to be a 2019 product. They said that over a year ago. And, just based, what other event are they really going to roll, give us a preview? I think a lot of developers are very curious about a more modular, expandable Mac Pro, so it does a lot for them, and I can't see any other event that would make sense. Will it be available to ship? No, I don't think so. But will they show us? Will they give us a pretty good preview like we got in 2013? I would bet money on it. I mean,
Yeah, I think I would too.
I'm not
this
a betting
time.
man, but I would bet money on it.
I'll bet you.
That's
I bet you $1.
The event. Because
Yeah.
if you think about that, WWDC.
WWDC, right? That's it.
Okay.
The Worldwide
I'm almost
Developers
learning it.
Conference.
Yes, but it's even larger. So longer. So if you think about this, you have the developers. There are the people interested in the new hardware.
Right.
Because we are as the final users, but the developers are the ones who makes the software. And then you have, that's the moment when they say, those are our new APIs for developing new stuff. So a new hardware like that should be in the same moment they talk about the new resources in the operation system.
Yeah.
So I think that's the
Well,
only
no.
one event they can do it. But that's my guess.
Well,
I
we
don't think
know
it's a
that
bad guess.
the operating system, we've been getting messages for months about 64-bit. We're moving to 64-bit.
Sure.
And it's got to be a marriage, in my mind, between the new OS and the new hardware they're rolling out. Like, there's a strong correlation between those two things, and they're going to want to show how they're blowing everyone away with this new machine. I can't see them not doing it.
Can't innovate
That's
my
actually an
ass.
interesting period, because if you can't, yeah, you can't
Right.
Thank you, Phil. No, I think there's some sense to that, and I think that the overall arc of what you're talking about makes sense to me. It is a coordinated leap that has to do with, I'm sorry, guys, with older stuff that doesn't conform to the new stuff. You have to change hardware and everything else if you want to play the new games. You can keep doing what you're doing, but you got to be able to play the new games.
Right. So on the YouTube, Eugene Lawrence says Logic Pro 10 hasn't been updated in a long time. Just saying. So I went on Twitter and said, and in January I said the same thing. Logic hasn't been updated in a long time. Then I said asking for a friend, which
I got to go get a power supply. I'm running out of phone battery. Be right back.
okay.
Okay.
Ronnie Corton says if they don't show it at WWDC, hell will break loose. That's what his opinion.
That's true.
I think
He's
so.
absolutely right.
I think so. I mean, there's no reason why they can't show us at least a diagram or a 3D model of it or something. That doesn't seem illogical since they've already announced it's a 2019 product.
Yeah.
So-
Yes, but it's not just another product,
No,
because
it's not.
you have to think about that trash can.
Right.
It was amazing, but
For a
the
certain
people,
crowd.
yes,
Like me,
asked
it
for a
worked great for
modular
me.
one, and I think if they say, well, we are planning a new product for the future with modular, so let's see what they have. It's not just another product. Everybody's
Absolutely.
looking at that product.
No, you're absolutely correct, Leo. And the fact that some professionals who use the Mac hardware over the years have been very vocal about it. There's no reason. Look, it's going to come out in 2019. There's no reason why they can't show us some kind of a model at WWDC. And I guess my question is, if they show it at WWDC, what not better to play on it than a new version of Final Cut as well at the same time?
I think we've talked about this a little bit before, but I think it might be similar to when VR was kind of demoed at WWDC before 10.4 came out.
Okay.
And I think they did the same thing with in the 2013. They showed a screenshot of an editor on Final Cut 10. I imagine there'll be images with. Like I watched WWDC last year, and we lost Bill. When we saw it last year, there was actually a lot of DaVinci Resolve. There was a lot of was it last year we were talking about?
No,
Or
I
2 years
think
ago, the
you're
iMac
absolutely
Pro?
correct. Yeah, I remember that now. They've done that with other Pro announcements on their website and stuff. They've had other Pro hard software running on it. So DaVinci.
I mean, it's nice to think, about Apple's Pro apps, but there's 3D apps and there's other
Right.
third-party apps, and because you've got a room full of developers there, they're going to want to see, the potential of stuff that they're working on and how it's going to behave.
Photoshop.
So I'm sure they.
Yeah.
Now I don't know, with Blackmagic stepping more and more on Final Cut's feet, I don't know what that relationship with Apple and Blackmagic is, but I'm sure we'll see some other people get some stage time up there. I mean, when they did the iPad Pro, they said, hey, here's Photoshop running on the iPad Pro. So
we are still waiting
I
for
think
that
we'll see
Photoshop.
those. And we're still, it probably, that's a whole nother. But hey, you've got doesn't Affinity Photo already work on there? So don't need to wait around for Adobe to figure that out.
Remember about the iMac Pro? They didn't launch it like we are, like the way we are talking about. They just asked for different artists to work on the iMac Pro, and we have all the cases there, and no one was using Apple software. No Motion, not Final Cut.
That actually was disappointing to me, though. On the website, when they had the iMac Pro and they had pros using iMac Pro and there wasn't Final Cut Pro 10, I thought that was a huge oversight. Like, they should have been showing 8K red footage on Final Cut Pro with Final Cut Pro 10 on an iMac Pro on the iMac Pro page. And the fact they didn't do that was very, very upsetting to me, personally.
But if you
I don't mind showing the other stuff, but...
But I think it's a smart thing about from Apple, because they don't sell computers for Apple software users.
Yeah.
They sell good computers, and the artists that needs that kind of stuff, they don't use Final Cut or Premiere. They go to 3D, visual effects, composing. So I think they have to show the hardware with the software the professionals they target to uses, like Cinema 4D or After Effects.
There was one of those videos where I don't think they did show somebody running Premiere, and that's where I was like, okay, but we need some Final Cut love somewhere there, and Logic love and stuff. So, like, I agree, the pro world is so much broader, but if it's Apple, they should still, throw a little bit of their own stuff in there from time to time.
Perhaps.
Maybe. The problem is, you guys can hear me, right? I'm back on?
Yes.
You're back.
Okay, good. Thanks. I'm off my headset, so hopefully it's not too hollow. My concern is that Apple has for a long time had this idea that they're going to leave software development outside of a few key areas to third parties. And so I'm not sure that it's ever going to be the program that pushes against After Effects is going to come from Apple in the form of Motion gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm thinking it's more that the Affinity Group or one of those other people who are software specialists will take Designer or other programs of that type, and whether it's Pixelmator Pro guys or somebody else, I think they're going to leave it with the third-party community, because I don't think Apple anymore wants to try to be the specialist kind of software people that dominate a broad range of categories. A few core, yes, and they've always done that. They've always said, we're going to make Keynote to go head-to-head with PowerPoint because we can do it better. And they've done that for decades, and everybody who uses both those understands that it is a whole lot simpler to work in Keynote, even if PowerPoint is in every corporate office. And, I occasionally have to do those kind of presentations, and it's just like, I got to take my Keynote and make it a PowerPoint compatible thing. What am I going to lose? I'm going to lose all this stuff. And this is after how many years where you think that these differences would have gone away? So I think Apple does that. I think they picked their points. And thankfully for all of us, video editing is a point they picked a long time ago that they wanted to stick with. And based on the reaction that I'm getting just in my workflow, they've done this fabulously, because I'm so ridiculously much more productive this year than any year I have worked in my career. I'm cranking out more work that's getting better results faster by factors of 2 times, 3 times, 4 times all day, every day. And I don't know if I could go back to that, back to the old ways.
I think I agree. I don't think they're gonna do some of those high-end specialized like 3D and compositing, directly. But I can see an opportunity where like they take their AR technology, for example, and apply it to some of these other applications, so that if I want to throw a dinosaur into my scene, Apple makes it ridiculously simple to do. It'd be a different type of approach. Right. I mean, you look at the Animoji technology, though, and that's something that, Adobe's got their character animator in After Effects. Well, Apple clearly has, with the iPhone, a motion capture device. So, I mean, why not make that something fun that you can use in clips all the way up to motion in Final Cut? So it'd just be a bottom-up approach of that technology, making it simpler, faster, easier to use, and it wouldn't have the kind of sophistication that you would need to, make your Hollywood visual effects shot. But hey, it might be great for a YouTube video. It might even work for a commercial. It might be the perfect thing for an indie film. It's a perfect solution, but it's not. It's going to come from a different direction, and eventually, that technology I could see getting good enough that, like when they were doing Jurassic World, ILM wrote a little app for the iPad that was basically an AR app, so they could place the dinosaurs in the shot. So that technology is even being used. That could be considered more consumery for previs type stuff. I remember watching way back in the day, watching the behind the scenes of the Star Wars Episode 1 in 1999, and they were showing a lot of the previous stuff they were doing with fights and even some of the battle sequences. They were cutting them together in iMovie. So just because the technology is more consumer or driven doesn't mean it can't fit into the workflow of a professional environment. It's just how are you using those tools and what are you using them for? Obviously, the iMovie edited fight scene did not make it into the movie, but it's interesting that that creative people are just going to be creative with whatever tools they have, and aren't and they're going to break through any limitations, no matter what tool they're using.
Yes, but if you think about that kind of visual effects, for instance, you have the pro level visual effects.
Right.
You're not going to get that. Okay. For intermediate, you have a lot of apps. For instance, in Instagram, a woman can make a selfie video with all the makeup, lips and everything in real time. It's tracked. It's amazing. Yeah. It's not sleeping in the face, and that's a popular app. So I wonder what is the intermediate step between the consumer product like that and the pro level visual effects. I don't know if it's there a place to go.
I agree with you 100%, Leo. I think that's the problem. Sometimes there is no intermediate thing, and I'm remembering when Fakar and Rekwa off of what we were talking about using in, I think, Focus, their temp titles, and they went, well, they look great. Why are we sending this out to a title house to recreate what's already right there in the file? And they ended up using them, and that's what went to the theaters. You think it's not good enough until you find out that it actually has been good enough all along, and that what wasn't good enough was your thinking about how to vet it to know that it's good enough.
Yes, but in the same time, you had that was the NABI was there, and if you think about this, do you remember the presentation Apple did with all the 3D titles in the series? And okay, I recall them. They show it in that stage. It was Final Cut Pro Works stage. You was there, Bill, and all that stuff was a kind of fake. Okay, the 3D titles were real, yes, they were real, but all the tracking was made by hand. So it's true that you can do 3D titles, but how do you put the 3D titles in a 3D world or in the right perspective, just
3D,
by eye?
3D space,
Okay.
right.
So but that's like saying if you've got a storyboard artist who works in pencil and charcoal and is really good, why force them to do it on a pad if they don't want to, with the understanding that eventually you're going to have to digitize these strokes that are on a pad right now with charcoal. And so at some point that artist may or may not choose to migrate to a more capturable format for their talents. It's previs. That's the point of it being previs, is to allow people to work quick and get the job done so they don't have to struggle through anything. And if you can take away the stage where you can capture the guy's handwritten notes into a format and archive it and turn it into text so you can store it and search it and do, that's the best of all worlds. And I think that's what we
okay, I agree. But speaking in about Final Cut Pro 10, I think Final Cut Pro 10 has reached a level of we can do everything professionally, almost everything. And in the amateur world, you can do it all too. And it's easy to do that. But we still need the kind of mixer and I need kind of behaviors like motions for audio. Okay, like saying when auto ducking, but not as the way Premiere does. The automatic ducking, real automatic ducking. And I think it's an interesting field there. But if I had to ask Apple for new stuff, I don't anything fancy. I don't want some fancy new tech. I just want them to look of the real world works. And for instance, if in Premiere you put 1080 by 1920, it says vertical video, not even portrait. They got people talk about vertical video. You don't have vertical video in Final Cut Pro. Yes, you can do a custom canvas in the timeline.
Right.
But this is a custom one. When Instagram Stories is one of the most important formats now.
Popular.
So it's not just popular, because in the pro world, we work with commercials for Instagram Stories. So it's not about a kid doing vertical video. Even the pro market is doing that. And well, you would like to choose, I need to make an advertising for Facebook that is a canvas, is a special canvas size, or Instagram Story or Instagram Post. They are all new formats, and isn't Apple the company that's supposed to innovate in that kind of stuff? Okay, this is what the world is talking about now and in the future. Okay, I'm having television formats in Final Cut, just that. And that's the past.
It seems to me that feels like you're talking about being annoyed by tactics. And I still think that Apple is going to win more hearts by strategy than it will by tactics. You can run after stamping out the annoyances for a larger and larger group of the editor group. That's great. That would be fine. And they'll thank you for it for 1 minute. Oh, we've got vertical video, labeled vertical video. They will thank you for 1 minute and they will never think about you again. But if you do something strategic that really drives friction out of something, keywords, strategic change.
Yes, they have already done that.
I know, that's what I'm saying. They did that because they were not thinking tactically. They were thinking strategically. And those are the things, and I've been saying this for the entire 7 or 8 years we've been doing these things. Apple wins big when they keep a large part of their brain on strategic thinking, not tactical thinking.
Well, I think they have to
make the roles and the big game changers that really leverage efficiency in the long run, not technical changes about whether or not people get back. And I'm sorry I'm even saying it, and I'm sorry Sean, I love you, whether they get back dupe detection or not, is not going to change their ability to go into the marketplace and compete. But roles for a house that's doing spots and has to tag 300 different versions for 300 different outlets is going to change their life.
Yes, but I think
different approach.
If you think about it, how many, in terms of percentage, how much users really uses roles? Okay, Final Cut Pro is intended for a wider spectrum of users, like YouTubers or Instagrammers. They are the new, a YouTube channel may have 4 million followers. Okay, how much TV shows get that kind of followers now? So I think they have to think about the everyday tasks, not only that one like roles. Okay.
No question. I'm not pushing back on that at all.
Okay, I have to create sequence projects.
Right.
Several times a day. Why should I go to custom to create the most used formats? That kind of small stuff.
You save it as a project, and you just pull back up the project. I don't understand the confusion about that.
It's not a confusion. It's like I think it's time to polish some things.
Okay, well, I can't argue with that. The constant polishing is always.
I'm not saying they should stop inventing new stuff or revolutionary stuff, but from time to time they just have to stop and say, okay, what small stuff we can tweak. I think they need that.
I 100% agree with you, but I will say...
I think that's the magic of Apple's user interface. Okay? Even compared with the other ones.
I will say, though, that how many times have we seen a discussion on one of the boards where somebody said, I only wish it could do this, and then somebody says, well, here's how you do it. It's not the old way you used to do it. Just do it this way. And the person comes back and goes, oh, I never knew it did that. That answers my problem. I just didn't know that was the way to get there. We've all seen that conversation dozens, maybe hundreds of times. So, if somebody doesn't know how to do a library that sits over on the side of their machine somewhere that has their formats in it, their graphics, looks, their things, and are able to copy a project out of that into a fresh library and therefore populate it with the kinds of formats that you want, is that the software's fault? I'm agreeing with you, though, on the fact that it would be legitimately better to just have a social media preset built into the software.
And
that's not what I'm pushing back on.
And coffee.
Coffee.
File make coffee.
I'm jumping back into this, but actually, I think we'll be moving into a world where, and I'm hoping it'll come into iMovie first, and then make its way into Final Cut, where resolution and frame rate are somewhat arbitrary, in that we're so rigid in our thinking of frames per second and resolutions and setting those things up. But in reality, take how a compound clip or synchronized clip works in Final Cut. It's just a container, and if you set it to 720p, but you throw it in a 4K timeline, and you have a 4K source clip, you actually it doesn't down-res it and then up-res it back to 4K, right? It's just a 4K clip, and the container is somewhat arbitrary. So what I propose is that your resolution and your frame rate are viewer and export settings and have nothing to do with the project. The project's doing 1,000 samples a second or something, and you actually are truly frame rate independent, and you make those selections on the outgoing side or how you're viewing it, because you're going to be creating content that needs to be seen on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, television, theaters, and you should be able to just kind of like, has anybody used one of these sites like a Wix or Squarespace or something like that, where you're designing a website, and then you click over to the mobile view, and then you can make some further editing in the mobile view without having to repopulate and redo all your content. It just kind of knows where to put it. That's where I see the future of like, for example, if you're placing a lower third, the lower third is no longer fixed in a resolution. The lower third is something that is pinned to a certain quadrant, and when you change the aspect ratio, when you change the resolution, that lower third moves to where it needs to go relative to that framing. So this is a whole different kind of way of thinking about it, but we're so stuck in those numbers. But when you have things like fill, fit, or with spatial conform, fill and fit and none, I think that will become more relevant. So in the meantime, I think Apple needs to have a resolution dropdown that is conducive for those things. But in the future, why is it a project setting? That's a viewer setting. That's an export setting.
Let me ask you though, Brad. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but that makes essentially your page of video layout more equivalent to a website. And from the people that I know who deal with HTML a lot, one of the reasons that modern websites look pretty similar is that the geometry of the HTML code and what it understands and what it allows you to do tends to push people into similar design constraints. You don't see a lot of crazy websites these days. They're mostly follow the rules, right? You're going to go to the upper left and there's going to be some drop down stuff over there. You don't really get those where the navigation engine is hidden in a ball in the lower right hand corner. That was there in the experimental phase, but it's largely fallen away. So I would argue that maybe that rigidity of make it do what the software can deal with rather than what you as the designer wants it to do might be as much a limitation than a boon. I'm not saying that, I'm asking that.
Okay, let me say a few words about that.
Please.
In first place, talking about web browsers and websites, Apple do have some innovation about that. If you think when you scroll about the phones, something changed in the page just because you are in the first part or the middle of the scroll. Just try it with I think the iPhone 10 have that kind of effects. There are some special visual effects in the scrolling, and that's because it's Apple. But if you have to deal with several devices, like Ben said about television or mobile, it's really difficult. So what do people do? They have some templates that they say it's not adaptive, it's the word, well, I recall that after. There's a word for that kind of adaptive thing. And if you try making small the browser window, you can see the menus and contents adapting a little bit, and then just suddenly regroups and you see the mobile version. Just try it after in Safari or in and that's because there are templates you can use without having too much to do to consider the different target devices. But in terms of design, you can do something like in Affinity, you can make the design of the UI and say, well, this icons goes there, this is the flexible space, so you can stretch it, everything, and all the stuff rearranges magically, okay? They can put something like that in Final Cut for square video and vertical video, so what you just have to say, well, the title is here, but this, if you stretch the screen, it's going there. But in the end, you get that kind of standard design.
Okay.
But if I have design backgrounds. So if I have to make a square video, perhaps I need to put all at the left margin. But for another kind of video, I just put it on the right with another kind of typographic align or design, maybe in 2 lines or 3 lines. And I don't think you can automate that.
Is that what in the HTML world? Is that what cascading style sheets are supposed to?
Something like that is.
Well, the difference is, though, from a videographer point of view, if you want to reach all these different aspect ratios, Instagram and 16:9, and you have to shoot with that in mind from the beginning. You really do, because when I shoot a 16:9, a lot of times I'm filling up the 16:9 frame, and if I go to Instagram, I'm going to be cutting out things like, for example, what I always use is Reservoir Dogs. If you've seen that one film and everybody is filming the entire 16:9 frame, you can't do that in a square video. So you have to shoot from the beginning with that in mind, I think. That's when it's most effective. If you're shooting with everything more toward the center and your sides really don't matter as much, it's much more effective.
Well, this is where 360 and we know that Apple has this in mind with putting VR tools in Final Cut. It isn't about the fact that you're going to output VR videos, but the idea being, I think eventually our primary cameras are going to become 180 degree or 270 degree or 360 degree videos, and the way you shoot you will use essentially it'll be metadata. You will say, this is the main place I want to see this is the theater, or the main place I want to see this is Instagram, or whatever, but it will be repurposed. So what will happen is you'll have your frame guides, and you'll preview it on set for the intended target, but you'll be capturing so much more information so that later you can then reframe and you can adjust because you captured everything and you have that flexibility. We saw that start with Red over 10 years ago with RAW. And people, how many DPs kick back and think it's blasphemy that you can select an ISO or white balance or change something later. They don't like that idea. They like the idea of, I give it to you the way that I want it. But the fact is, because people, you got to meet people where they are, and some people like me are going to want to hold my phone this way,
sure,
to watch content.
Yes.
And some people are just going to hold it this way.
Well, that I understand. Yes.
If it's inherent in the video to just adapt to the way I'm looking at it, and of course I think you need the design control, but the way I see it in Final Cut, for example, is I would say, hey, I'm going to preview this to see what it's going to look like in Instagram. Final Cut's going to do the best job it can to assume where I want to replace my lower thirds and whatever, but then I can control that, and just kind of like an audition, it's going to save that and know that, hey, when you're in this view, this is how you prefer to see it. And then that gets encoded into the output file. So it'll make a guess, I'll be able to control it, and when I switch views, it will save that intention for that view, and then it'll be encoded in some sort of master file that gets output afterwards and can be viewed however everyone else is viewing.
Tiny quick things that can throw the whole thing into chaos. First, when you were talking about that, I thought, okay, so what we need is a square screen, and then we need to put over the top of that something like the Red Cross logo, and pretty much everybody in America knows what that is. It's a big cross in the center of the screen, right? So you have a vertical, you have a horizontal, you have a vertical, you have the whole frame on the outside, and you just have to protect for everything. You don't put anything that's not super losable inside that center square, right? That makes it okay for everybody. But then I just thought about what we experienced when we were doing this call, right? Richard said I'm in the lower left. No, on my screen you're in the upper right. I'm over offset to the outside of my phone. I could be on Richard's phone offset to the inside boundary of his phone. We are trying to impose order on a certain amount of chaos that nobody has any real control over. Well, and I think we're just going to have to accept some.
You have control of your own frame.
But see, I can take you, I'm touching you, and I moved you right there up where Brad is, and I'm moving me over where Richard is, and I'm moving this around. My phone doesn't care what my layout I thought it was. It's the layout I'm going to suddenly turn it into as the user.
Yes, but I'm still centered in my frame.
You are in your
You
own.
are.
Yeah, in your own.
But if
So,
I'm
two
shot
words.
for a rule of thirds right side, which I am putting myself into because I have bright content over there and I didn't want to be there the whole time, what happened? I'm making that decision based on how it was shot today. So does everything go in the center? Do we have to shoot everything?
Well, this is what I'm saying, but like,
Well,
the end user's not looking at a VR video. The end user's looking at a video that adapts. But I've already previewed the version they would hold vertically, the version they would hold, and I've made those decisions for them.
Richard's the only one who has the one that's going to the web.
Well,
the rest of us can have to build
Skype
this
call is a different beast. I'm not really sure on that. I'm just saying on the content I produce,
Right.
I control how they see it on whatever device they're looking at.
Everything.
That's the illusion we give ourselves. I do the same thing. I'm trying to break from
And
that
then,
illusion.
and then you've got Tom Cruise and the director of Mission Impossible, and they're going to do a PSA announcement and tell us why everyone's all wrong for watching their videos a certain way.
Well, but which one of us, Brad, you mentioned about a 180 video. Which one of us is using that now? Or intends to in the next year?
Because because I don't have the camera I want to shoot with doesn't exist yet.
Well, there you go.
So I'm happy
Makes it hard
to
to
work
rent.
I'm happy to work in a 16:9 type of frame for most things that I do for now.
Right.
Until I have a camera that can record depth and change the depth of field and has the resolution and the quality that I get from basically the camera I imagine using that would record 180 or 360 would be able to completely mimic any lens choice or anything that I would want from a physical camera I can use today.
Well, that's interesting. So you mean like the way that digital emulates analog audio, like tubes and stuff, something like that?
Yeah, so like imagine you've got an iPad app that's, Filmic Pro or something, and Filmic Pro gives you all these options of aspect ratio or whatever. What if you could purchase in-app or rent, Panavision Prime lenses or something, and somebody's gone through and they've sent lasers through the lens and they've done all the math so that I can accurately virtually reproduce that on my iPad. And it has all the flaws and all the lens characteristics and things like that. I mean, that's the kind of virtual camera I'm thinking of. And then it's just metadata. And if I decided that, hey, you know what, these lenses didn't look the way I wanted to, in post I could decide that I magically shot on some Cooke S4s. So that's a... Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, but I think it's not about the emulation of the lens, but it's an optical thing.
Yeah.
I think it's how the light is coming to the sensor. I don't know if you can emulate that.
Why not? Well, I mean, if you've got a brand new type of sensor technology that's recording super high resolution and can see depth from where the light's coming in. Did you see the stuff with Lytro? I mean, I know that company went under, but
one thing is depth of field. Another thing is if you just put some lenses in your eye, you can. I don't think if one sensor can capture different kind of, but it can emulate somehow. But have you tried to put a fisheye effect on a flat image?
But it doesn't have
all the 3D stuff because stuff behind me appears or disappears depending on the lens. So I don't think if the sensors
can... But right, okay, so there's a perfect example. Stuff, there's occlusion, right? You're talking about things disappearing behind you. Already we're seeing, with Adobe and Blackmagic, content autofill. It's using whatever it's using to try to like make you disappear or something in the frame and fill it in intelligently. There are seeds. It's not there. There are seeds of this type of technology being able to exist. You've got LiDAR scanning, which can actually tell you how far things are. So how long till we, along with as part of our metadata, do we have a depth map in our image? How long till we get that? How long till we? I mean, this is all interesting stuff. And then if you watch Chioni's Faster Together speech, where he was talking about in the digital world we're losing some of that analog touch, and that there's part of us as a human wants that film grain. It wants that, we're going to be replicating that in the digital world in the future.
I just want content-aware superstar beautify at a button.
Well, for
Give me
instance,
that.
okay,
Then everybody
I could
else
have
is
a-
beautiful.
I could have a sign behind me, okay, and in the magical software, okay, you can read the sign and say, I'm smart. But if I move it, maybe I say I'm not. So you
It's
can
not
put
about-
all the out of field you want, but it's not the content, the real
There you
content.
go, right down here going, Bill's funny. Bill's funny. It's like
Then you turn it and says you are not.
optically, but I'll turn into a comedian overnight.
So let's what about Final Cut Pro 10.5? I mean,
What about?
I think we all agree.
I like it.
Yeah, exactly. I like it too. I think we all agree that it's very likely to come out in 2019, right? So the idea is when the Final Cut Pro Creative Summit is a good point. They could release it at any time because they don't need an event to release Final Cut Pro, a number, but it would make sense at the FCPX Creative Summit in the fall. So what kind of features though? I mean, are we going to get collaboration everybody's talking about?
So yeah, before you do features though, let's do strategy. What do you think a year ago or 2 years ago, when they knew that they were going to do a brand new box and they knew they could start working on new code for these tentpole apps like Final Cut Pro 10, do you think there was a strategy? And by that I'm saying on a part of the industry they wanted to attack and excel in.
Well, we know they hired a pro workflow team.
Yes.
And we know from the Creative Summit that pro workflow team was producing content.
Yes.
So I think that is indicative to what is the feedback those professionals that are working on these shows are going to be giving them.
So they're speculative, Brad. What would you think are going to be like one or two words of the strategy that those guys are interested in? And, a word like collaborative is perfectly fair for this. We've all heard about that. Do you think that's going to rise to the top, or will something else rise to the top?
I think what we saw with workflow extensions.
Okay.
You had Frame.io, which is collaboration through the web, be a headliner for that.
Right.
Right.
So I think Apple was already saying, okay, collaboration is important. We're going to partner up with someone like Frame.io to build out a part of that, a version of that is important for a lot of our users.
So can we call that interoperability? Is that the fact that it talks to and receives data from other programs that follow its rules?
I mean, that was workflow extensions, which I think was a step into, okay, we can't solve all your collaborations problems right now, but maybe Kino, Keyflow Pro, whoever else can kind of fill some of those holes in the meantime while we crack that nut ourselves.
Well, it's interesting because I use Shutterstock through the workflow extension a ton now. I mean, the last 3 videos I've done, I've gotten probably 70 or 80 clips because they're mostly their pitch videos, and that's the best way to work with that is through stock video. So the key to me is that I thought at first I was a little leery. Okay, it's just another way to spend more money by plumbing more things in there.
Perpetual.
Which is fair. I mean, it's, it is selling stuff, but at the same time, the amount of friction in my workflow that it has blown out of there, so I don't have to go searching 6 stock shot sites to try to find a particular clip. I'll prioritize and see if I can get it done through Shutterstock because it's plumbed right there. And then I only have to look for the things it couldn't satisfy my need for this project on. I think that interoperability, cross-program collaboration built into the software has been a boon for me. I don't know about anybody else. But that's my thing. So what else?
Well, and I keep looking at the past to kind of indicate what's the future and what might be the values that might be important. And when I look at Legacy Final Cut, 9 years into Legacy Final Cut, we were at like between versions, between Final Cut 6 and Final Cut 7. Would that be right?
Yeah,
2008.
Pretty close. Yeah.
2008.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
And at that point, the software was basically mature, and that's when we were saturating Hollywood, and I can see them not necessarily going after Hollywood, but I can see them saying, like, really proving the point that this software, yes, is used by YouTubers, which when I was doing the Adobe sponsored survey, I got the feeling from the questions they were asking, because when I picked Final Cut Pro 10 and it took me down that path of this is the editing program, I got the feeling from the questions that were being asked that there was this attitude, at least among Adobe, that most people think Final Cut Pro 10 is used by just YouTubers and not the high end. And I think that that's something that they would want to squash, but their definition of the high end is not the same definition as Hollywood's definition of high end.
Right.
So I feel like, yes, collaboration is going to be highlighted, that they're going to have some sort of shared library to show us that there's going to be some new plumbing under the hood, that there might be even some potential for some iCloud type of sharing or sharing through some sort of cloud network. That's possible, and if they do, the whole point will be to show that there are no barriers for Final Cut Pro 10, that we can blow past a lot of these assumed barriers that people have that are maybe keeping some users out of it. And again, not Hollywood users, but there is there's that I don't know. I would be trying to squash misperceptions like that and really be coming to the table with something that shows a better way to do things. That they haven't considered.
Number one tip: before 10.5 comes out, back up 10.4, whatever you have. Back up your libraries, because if they're going to make something, I think that's going to be collaborative. I think there's going to be some major changes under the hood. So
yes.
Back up. How many times have you guys, and I see this all the time, somebody says, oh, my library's corrupted or my media is gone. Well, what about your backup media? What about your backup library? I'm not talking about the one that Final Cut Pro does. I'm talking about the one you made when you first started your project, when you made a duplicate of your media and a duplicate of your library and another hard drive.
I don't know, Leo took a sabbatical from Facebook for a while, but I think it was just this week that Richard, Bill, and I weighed in on one of those backup conversations and all kind of proposing our different little solutions. And I know, Richard, you've got an application you use to manage your backups. Bill and I talked about, making XMLs and saving them. And of course, I don't use the XML as my primary backup, but it's nice to know that I could throw a small file up on the cloud and, on either Frame.io on an ongoing project or throw it somewhere like on Google Drive, and just have that extra security. If the media exists in another physical location and I have this little file that I'm saving on a regular basis, that if my house burned down,
yes,
I could go pick up a new Mac at the Apple Store, I could log in, I could grab that backup hard drive from that producer, that person or whoever, or if it's small enough, maybe the footage is up, on Google Drive or something, and I can keep working. And maybe, some people are just working on a project and it breaks down and they haven't thought this through, but it's usually having gone through some horrible experiences, losing a hard drive or something, that
right,
teaches us the wisdom to think about those things, think about worst case scenarios before we start.
I can't even start a project without at least 2 physical copies of all the media in the library before I even start. Separate hard drives, at least 2. But some people just rely on one. And then something goes wrong with the hard drive, and they said, what do? I said, well, I always say, where's your backup copy? Where's your backup of the media before you start?
You want to know how obsessive I am? When you see
Fire. Yeah, there's got the fire safe.
That's a fire safe, and there's a USB line running from my edit system into the fire safe.
And what's your address, Bill?
And you know what's going to happen, though, right? Like, there's going to be electrical surge. There's going to be an electrical surge over that USB
The fire
cable.
will start inside it.
And then it'll flip up inside the fire safe.
Just saying. At some
hard
point
drive
when you're
is
working
gonna
for relatively large
burn.
companies,
No,
keep your
absolutely.
media safe.
Look at
The hard drive in the fire safe is going to overheat.
No,
It's gonna...
please. When you start your project, make a duplicate of everything on a separate hard drive. Then start editing. Don't start before that.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, you have to think about these things. And I swear to God, that was my goal, was that if the fire burns down, can I check into a hotel room and keep working?
Yeah.
This is the
No,
typical hard drive I get for a job.
Yes,
Okay?
exactly.
The cheap one.
Yes, sure. Just as a backup.
Sometimes it's 4K. No, this is my main drive.
That's your main drive?
Yes.
But you have a
Mine
backup
this is a
somewhere,
hard
right?
drive.
You have a backup
Yes,
somewhere.
but okay, just imagine this drive working all day. It will get broke.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
And for clients, when they have all the facilities, they think about this as the media, the storage for the media. They don't even think about buying two of this.
Right.
So I don't have a RAID or something in the. They think that's expensive. They spend thousands of dollars in shooting,
Right.
but
Yeah.
then this is expensive.
No, Brad, we used XMLs going back and forth when we did Off the Tracks for like a year. So I like XMLs, absolutely.
Well,
They're great.
on your point, Leo, like, I've run into a lot of producers that want to nickel and dime the storage, and it's baffling because it's like you spent how much on the crew and how much on the talent and how much on all these people.
Craft services cost more.
Yeah,
than this stuff.
and you're like looking at spending, depending on the project, it could range
Yes,
from
everything is here.
$1,000. It could be $750
All your dollars.
to $7,500. But anything in that range, some people they get weird about, and I'm like, this is where it lives. Like you need to be thinking about that. So I always insist on 3 backups on any film project I work
Absolutely.
on.
That's great.
And you know what? One of those backups can be a bunch of cheap drives, but what I'm working off of needs to be robust.
When I
Something I can trust.
When I had a recording studio, I always gave the bands the option to buy their multi-track tape or to lease their multi-track tape. Almost all of them just leased it, right? So 20 years later, they come back to me and they say, by any chance do you still? I said, yes, I do. I still have the tape. Now it's going to cost you $100 a reel of tape for me to digitize that for you. Because I have to bake it.
Yes.
I have to bake it for
Hello,
8 hours.
We are the Rolling Stones. Do you have the?
Yes. Yeah, they just leased it. Well, a lot of times the record companies own that tape anyway, physical tape. So the Stones are.
Well, you look at films shot like I bet there's a lot of classic movies that studios didn't keep track of source tapes, master tapes, or like film reels and things like that, and they're having to find some print somewhere that somebody magically has that they can restore. I think it's been an ongoing problem of what do you do with your media.
Sure.
I think there's people that have learned the hard way and are very careful, and I think there's people out there that just fly dangerously.
There you go. That's us. All of us.
I thought we
Now
were the
you
ones
gotta
who learned the
speak
hard way.
off. That's an hour and a half, and I think that's about all the time I can devote to this.
Absolutely. I can't afford to pay anymore. I can't pay you overtime, Bill. So
I'm going to double your rates here, Richard.
there you go.
Maybe triple them.
There you go. By the way, the last one we did of these has like 800 views, which isn't too bad for a live video across platforms. Periscope is amazing. I'm surprised at how many people watch on Periscope. It'll be up. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. To me, YouTube and Facebook are the big ones, but Periscope's been hanging in there. So
Who bought it? Who owns it now? That's
but it's Twitter's video. They use it for their video, but Twitter also has their own video. You can embed it 2 different places. So long form and live stream, they use Periscope.
yeah. Okie dokie. I'm going to
All
say
right.
goodbye. You guys have fun with the rest of the chat.
Bye, Bill.
Talk to you later, Bill.
Bye, Bill.
So we're gonna have the WWDC coming up very shortly, like 3 weeks. It's the beginning of June. So that'll be
That's crazy.
yeah. I'm just really hoping they do introduce the Mac. I mean, at least show us the Mac Pro. I mean, releasing it would be phenomenal, but you know, because I need something. I need something.
You ready to upgrade? I just bought new computers, so
Well,
I'll
because
wait.
of the Thunderbolt 3 ports, that's the main reason. My 2017 has 2, and I need 3.
Yeah.
Because people say, well, you can daisy chain. I said, listen, I have docks, I have RAIDs, but the main thing is I have the Thunderbolt audio interface. It has to be connected directly, and there's no Thunderbolt second port. So I use one port just for that interface.
Well, how many does the iMac Pro has 4, right?
Yes, iMac Pro has 4. The Mac Mini has 4. MacBook Pro has 4. The old Mac Pro has 6 Thunderbolt 2 ports.
Mac Pro? i9 Mac Pro?
Yeah, the old one. It has 6, right? 6 Thunderbolt
The
ports.
old Mac Pro had 6 Thunderbolt 2
right.
ports.
So the 2017 and 2019 iMac has 2. That doesn't make any sense to me. But because the Mac Mini has 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think the iMac will be redesigned in 2020, and we'll probably have all USB-C ports, and hopefully those are Thunderbolt as well.
Yeah, there you go.
But we'll see. And then as far as the Mac Pro, I'm sure it'll give you a lot of connectivity.
I'm sure
That's
it
the
will.
point of it.
It won't be enough for everybody, but it'll be plenty of Thunderbolt 3s and probably some USB-Cs and 10 gig E. They'll have those for sure. So anyway, Leo, thank you for joining us today. It's been a while since we talked to you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I think this is the first time we've talked, Leo, like aside from like emails and...
Perhaps in the Hangouts.
I think,
I don't know.
Years
no,
ago.
Brad wasn't on those Hangouts.
Oh, okay.
Brad's a
So,
newcomer.
no, that's the first.
They canceled those shortly after I joined in.
Yeah.
And
Well,
now we're doing these hangouts, which are
I think
it's a great. I think this is better because it's something that we can connect to a broader community.
right.
Before, for people maybe that don't know, that there were Final Cut hangouts, but they were just Google Hangouts that a few
Secret
people would get
group.
together on.
Right.
And I kind of came at the tail end of those.
Okay.
And then nobody really had time for them. But I think what you're doing here, Richard, is it's the same kind of conversations, but it's more open and broader. I
Yeah.
guess we can't speculate. Well, we can speculate all we want.
Yeah, we can.
I don't know.
People say when I say something on like Twitter, some guy said, "Is that all you can say, Richard?" Well, I mentioned that a good bet would be 10.5 at the FCPX Creative Summit, and he said, "Is that all you can say about it?" I said, "No." I can say whatever. I'm not on the beta team. I'm not restricted under any kind of NDA, and that's the way I like it. Because I would honor the NDA if I was under one. I've been under them before, of course, for different things, but not for that. I like talking about it. Gentlemen, I sure appreciate you all coming today.
Yep. Thanks for having us.
Just one last word.
Sure.
I look for the word. It's responsive design. That thing.
Responsive
the
design.
objects.
I like that.
Okay.
Yep.
That's the word, and we kind of have that on Motion.
Yep.
When you make up the plugin in Motion, you have to switch through different resolutions and see what happened with the objects. So
Sure.
we're in the middle of that.
Sounds good. Thanks, gentlemen. I'll talk to you again. Thanks, Leo. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
See
Bye.
ya.